Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Today, Isaac Lidsky will show us how to overcome obstacles in a world that can't see clearly. Isaac, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Isaac, you've written a book called Eyes Wide Open. Can you give us a little bit of your background, how you came to that title?
Sure. So when I was 13, I was diagnosed with a blinding disease. And from about age 13 to age 25 or so, over that dozen years, I slowly lost my sight in a very bizarre way. At first, I was terrified, and I sort of knew that blindness was going to ruin my life. But an amazing thing happened. The way in which I lost my sight gave me really rich insight into the way the mind works, the power of the mind in shaping our own realities. And it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. And I wrote the book to share that vision with others.
I mean, you're so easygoing about that, but this book is so interesting. And as I said to you before the show, and I'll let our audience know, I actually thanked you, and I said, I think of myself as being so lucky just because I have people like you who write these great books. And not only do I get to read them, but I get to interview the author. What could be better other than working in the ice cream factory, you know? That's the perfect life. Now, you start out in your book and you say, what you don't know can't hurt you, but what you think you know certainly can hurt you. Talk about that. What does that mean, and where does that fit in?
Sure. So, we are empowered to really sort of shape our realities. The way that the circumstances we confront manifest themselves in our lives is entirely within our control. It doesn't always feel that way, though, when we're not aware and when we're not careful. Very often we experience as sort of objective truth, as sort of immutable reality, things that are anything but. So the way we can experience our self-limiting assumptions about ourselves, the way we can misconceive our strengths and weaknesses, and sort of misconceived success and value in life. And certainly fear is a very big thing. It's a very pernicious force in life. And there's all these things that really are within our control, but we often experience as some sort of reality out there that's beyond our control.
And you mentioned that we have a kind of a predisposition to reason from experience. Now, I would think that's a good thing. The typical type of story of the child, if they go to a dog and the dog snaps at them or barks, a lot of time that child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, they'll kind of grow up, at least for the next few years, being fearful of dogs. And maybe that's a good thing. At least they're cautious and not sticking their hand in the cage or teasing the dog or taking the dog's food. But tell us why you say it that way.
Well, so, you touched on a couple interesting things there. So we're built to predict, to infer, to assume. I mean, it's the way our brain is wired. We build up this sort of vast database of experiences and come up with sort of rules and logic that we reason from. It's a very useful tendency. The example you give is a great one. It's how our ancestors knew to run from animals they had never seen before, but knew were ferocious, were problematic. But it can also be the source of great harm. And when it comes to fear in particular, I think it's very harmful because when we confront the unknown in times of change, in times of crisis, by definition, we really don't have any experience to reason from. There's nothing in the database. Yet fear persists, and it can manifest for us the sort of the worst case scenario, the most awful possibility, and we tell ourselves these awful scenarios. And if we're not careful, if we're not aware, we experience them as truth, and we believe them, and then they become our truth, right? They're sort of self-realizing or self-perpetuating. So it's a useful tendency, but it's also one that we want to make sure we're aware of, we focus on, and that we do it with sort of intention and purpose.
Now, you talk about a Harvard basketball experiment. I think it was in 1999.
Yes.
Can you tell our audience what the experiment was and why you bring it up in the book?
Sure. So, this was a really neat experiment. 2 Harvard psychologists showed folks a video of six folks playing basketball. I think it was 3 people wearing white shirts, 3 people wearing black shirts, and they were the participants in the study were told to count the number of passes made by the players in the white shirts, which is an activity that took a lot of attention and sort of focus. In the middle of this video, in the middle of this sort of basketball game, a man in a gorilla costume walks out into the middle of the court, thumps his chest, looks around, and walks off the court. Fully half of the study participants were so engrossed in the counting task, were so busy paying attention to the passes of the ball, that they missed entirely this gorilla. And it was so shocking even to them that most of them, after the fact, when showed the video, insisted that some trick was being played, that the video was switched, that this was not, in fact, the video they watched. The reason why I like that study so much is because it's one of many great examples of how sight is a masterful illusion. The human experience of sight is something that feels real, right? You open your eyes and there's the world. I mean, we say seeing is believing. The truth of the matter is that the experience of sight is this masterful mental construction that's cooked up in your brain that implicates so much more than just data from your eyes. It implicates your conceptual knowledge, your memories, your opinions, your emotions, what you're paying attention to, and on and on and on. And yet it feels so real. So sight is sort of the aha moment for me as I lost my sight, as the illusion was shattered for me, as my sight deteriorated. I realized this sort of fundamental contradiction, that it's something that is entirely of our own making, and yet we experience it as immutable truth, as something that's out there, that's external, that's beyond our control. And that's the eyes wide open vision. That's so true of so much of our life. Once we can see that clearly and take back control, it'll bring you immeasurable joy and fulfillment and success. It's been a real blessing in my life.
Isaac, a couple of comments I want to make and then get to something you just said. One, I hope there's an audio version of the book Eyes Wide Open, because you have such a beautiful speaking voice. I think you would just mesmerize an audience. And if anything, and I once had a book that I enjoyed very much. I actually drove around the parking lot where I worked several times just so I could listen to another chapter of it. But you actually...
You're kind. There is an audio book, and they did let me read it, which was a neat experience. So.
Well, I don't think it was let. I think they knew when they had a gem there, and they realized if you're reading it with that voice and that passion, it's going to go over very well. So to our audience, if you're not a reader, be sure to get the audio version of Eyes Wide Open. If you're on the trail of success, this is the man to listen to, as you're going to hear as we go through. Isaac, at this point in the show, we like to remind our listeners that our guest today is Isaac Lidsky, Lidsky. His book is Eyes Wide Open. And Isaac, can you tell us where we can get the book, and is there a website where we can find out more about it?
Sure. So if you, the best place to go for more information is probably my website, which is just my last name.com. So Lidsky, Lidsky.com. You can get all sorts of information there about the book. I have a blog. I did a TED Talk that you can access there. The book is available anywhere, you buy any fine retailer of books, Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble or Indie Books, or, any physical bookstore should be there. I'm immensely overjoyed to share that the book is actually a New York Times bestseller. So
I'm not surprised.
Well, you might not be, but I was pretty excited. It's quite a dream. So anyway, so the book is widely available, I guess is the point.
And we'll give that information again, but to our audience, number one, it's really going to open up your eyes, as Isaac said. You're going to start thinking of things differently. Your approach to success will be more open. And I'm going to tell you for sure, the next time you talk to someone at a cocktail party or a family gathering and you drop in a couple of the anecdotes or stories or points that's made in this book, they're going to walk away and saying, when did he get so smart? When did she get so smart? It's really a good book. I mean, it's genuinely just a good read, but you're going to pick up so much from the book, and hopefully we'll get a lot from Isaac today as we're talking to him. Isaac, tell me, too, there was something I found very interesting. You said our walking speed, like if we're just out walking, actually changes based on whether we're thinking about fast animals or slow animals. Is that true? Can you fill me in on that a little more?
Yeah, so this is another great example of how sight is this illusion, and how it's really this thing that involves so much more than just our eyes. So the way our perception of speed, whether we're watching a video of someone walking in a lab, or whether we're walking ourselves, our perception of speed itself, it's been proven, will change based on all sorts of factors. So if we're told to think about a fast animal like a cheetah versus a slow animal like a turtle. Similarly, if you have just exercised and you're asked to sort of quantify how steep a hill is, it looks steeper to you if you've just exercised. A landmark looks farther away if you're wearing a heavy backpack, and all sorts of stuff that, again, it's this unique virtual reality that your mind creates for you, and yet you think it's fact, it's truth.
Now, you mentioned it. This was a unique question. Now, we've been on the air almost 29 years, and I never had someone come up with this. You asked a question, what images come to mind when you say success? What type of images, what kind of answers do you get to that? And why the question?
Well, that's for everyone to answer or think about for themselves. And I should stress, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. The visual cortex, the full third of our brain, by volume, approximately a third of our brain comprises the visual cortex, right? And that's what's sort of processing all the information from the eyes. But mixing and mingling that information with all sorts of other things going on in the brain, like we've been talking about. And what's neat is that visual cortex is at work even when your eyes aren't in the mix. So when you are visualizing success, when you're dreaming, when you're conceptualizing stuff, your visual cortex is hard at work, basically creating that experience for you, creating that world for you. So, that to me is a compelling example of how, we link images to concepts in our lives. Many folks would, see a luxury car or a, large yacht and immediately think about, success and money and power. And, I ask in the book, do you think about sort of success and value if you see a laughing child? What does that look like to you? And anyway, just at our core, we're so inherently visual creatures, and it's a fascinating thing.
You give us an anecdote in your book about one day when I think you just went for a walk in your neighborhood to get a cup of coffee, and the fact that you put that in the book has a major point in your life. So can you tell us why that's in there and the lesson you learned from that?
Yeah, so this was early in my transition to sort of living as a blind guy, so to speak. I was still kind of practicing using a walking cane. And it was a kind of an early journey on my own to see if I couldn't get to and from this market near my home and get a cup of coffee. On the way home, I became lost and realized that I had also left my mobile phone at home as well. And in the moment that I realized that I was lost, there was this sort of visceral fear and this awfulizing and a panic, and then quickly followed by all these awful thoughts and implications for my future. I thought, I'm hopeless. I'll never be independent again. And now and all these just awful things that we tell ourselves. When the reality of the situation, once I was able to kind of take some deep breaths and think it through, eyes wide open, the reality of the situation was it was a beautiful spring day. It was a Sunday. I had nowhere, to be. I wasn't, late for anything. And while I was on a sort of quiet and deserted street, it was a residential street. And, all the homes that lined the street were, full of people who were enjoying their Sunday morning. So, I realized, well, I can knock on a door and ask for some help, call my wife, and she'll come grab me. And there's really not much of a problem after all. And in thinking through it, it's a longer story, but successively better solutions emerged the more I thought about it to where I finally wound up making my way back and just sort of figuring out my route and getting home on my own. And that story, I think about it all the time because, in a moment, sort of fear, raw emotion, turned my world upside down, and it seemed so awful and catastrophic. When at the end of the day, getting lost wound up being a great thing. It wound up doing far more for my confidence and for my, skills, mobility skills, than any uneventful trip, ever could have. And it's really all about, again, taking control of your reality, framing the moment, and choosing in every moment how you want to live your life and who you want to be.
Isaac, we want to find out more about Eyes Wide Open, but at this point in the show, we like to remind our listeners that